What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. I am the Hobbyist, and today is a very big day for the Axial Scx10 project. As you can see, I have got a ton of aluminum upgrades on the workbench that we're going to be installing today. I've got shock towers, I've got chassis braces, link mounts, steering knuckles, portal covers, the Panhard reinforcement bracket, all made out of aluminum, and they're all going on this truck today. So I'm going to be showing you how to install all of them, and yeah, probably little tips and tricks along the way. So without further ado, let's get right into it. To start off, as with any project, it's recommended that you take the body off, put that aside so that we have the workspace. Now, I'm not going to have all the parts on the workbench all at one time. I'm going to take pieces and parts as I need it, but I'm going to try and do this in an order that makes the most sense as for taking things apart. So I'm probably going to start with these aluminum upper link mounts by KYX because the upper link mounts, which are right in here, are going to be the hardest to get to. So I'm going to have to figure out how to get the skid plate out from underneath there without taking too much apart, but I guess we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to try and get that out, and then I'll put you guys back on when I've done that. Alright guys, so I've gotten the skid plate dropped out. It was a lot more complicated than I first determined. So I removed the two screws that are underneath the skid plate, as well as the 4 screws that hold it to the chassis braces or the chassis rails itself. But then I had to loosen all the screws along here and remove these 3 screws in order to be able to separate the chassis enough to bring it down. So now I'm going to remove all the links so that I can work on it easily and put it on. But yeah, it was a bit more difficult to get to the skid plate than I thought, but that's why we're doing this one first, because it's the hardest to get to. Oh, one more thing, I also had to remove this servo to get it to slide out. Alright, so after a lot of unscrewing things, it was honestly quite painful to try and get that, but I finally got the skid plate out. So the link mounts that we're replacing are the upper link mounts, which are these 3 pieces here, and they're held in by 2 screws each. So you pop those out. Make sure to remember where the links went, because there's 3 mounting locations, so you want to remember where they went. Yeah, so take those out, and then we can get to putting on the aluminum ones. Real quick note, you'll see that there are numbers on the link mounts. There are 2 1s and 1 2, so make sure you know which is which. Alright, so here are the KYX aluminum pieces. As you can see, they're very nice. They come with all the hardware, and I think part of that is because if we pop one of the stock ones off, comparing the stock one to the new one, the ridge isn't as extreme, and it kind of is a bit more lower profile. So because of that, I do recommend that you use the provided hardware instead of the stock one, just to be safe, so you don't, over tighten anything. So yeah, so I'm going to get all this installed with the included hardware, and then I'll put you guys back on. Alright, so I got the new aluminum upper link mounts installed. I used the silver screws right here on the table here. Those are the original screws. These 3 screws are included. These are to actually go in for the upper links to screw into the mount itself, and I am going to use these just in case the thread is slightly different than the stock ones. So I don't really need the plastic ones anymore, but I am going to use it for reference as to where the hole went. So I'm going to mount this all back in, and then I'll show you what it looks like when everything's screwed back together. One thing I do want to mention is that since these screws are going into aluminum, you do want to use a little bit of thread locker to screw those in. Alright guys, so I got it all put back together, and I'm not even kidding. Just that little installation took me 30 minutes. So that took a while, but as you can see, it's kind of hard to see them. There's one of them right there, because the others are hidden under the servos. But they're all in. They're very nice. I used all the included hardware. I didn't use any of the stock hardware. In fact, here is the stock hardware in this little magnetic dish here. So that's spare screws, I guess. So that's the upper link mounts. So now it's time to move on to the next parts. Okay, so the next parts all kind of come on it all at once. So it's the front portal steering knuckles, the caps, as well as the axle side Panhard reinforcement bracket. Now, because of all this stuff that involves working with the axle, it'll be much easier to show it and much easier to work on if I just take the front axle off. So that's what I'm going to do, and once I have it off, I'll put you guys back on. Alright, so here's the front axle. I got it off of the truck. It's just a few screws. It's not too bad, just removing the links and stuff like that. So the few things that are going on is this Panhard reinforcement bracket by Bauhaus. So the Panhard link on the SCX10 mounts to this area right here, and it's just this flimsy piece of plastic. So this aluminum piece really will beef that up. And then I've got full aluminum steering knuckles, which replace the plastic housings, as well as the matching aluminum portal covers to go with it. So I need to start disassembling by taking off the steering links and then disassembling the portal box. So after getting the steering linkages off, then it's just two of these little kingpin bolts that you have to take off, and you'll have the portal box assembly off, and then I've already taken off the 12mm wheel hex. So now it is 4 screws to take off the cover, and then you can start disassembling things. Now, one thing to note with the KYX aluminum ones that I purchased, they also come with hardware for screwing the covers on, and I highly recommend that you once again use those just in case the thread type is slightly different. And then also remember, this is all going into aluminum, so you want to thread lock those screws as well as the kingpin bolts when reassembling. So I'm going to get the cover off, show you what's inside, and show you what you need to transfer over. Alright, so I got the cover off, and you can see it's a bit of a greasy mess in there, but there it is. That's the cover, and then inside you've got these two gears right here. These are the portal gears. So now it's time to really transfer everything over, the bearings, the gears, the shaft, all of that. It's just the case that is being changed. So I'm going to transfer everything over and show you what it looks like. Alright, so I got all the portal gears transferred over. I've got the bearings in the cover. So really it's just now a case of sliding the cover on and screwing it together, just like this. So I got all the screws thread locked in. I've got the wheel hex screwed back on. Make sure that you put in the little silver spacer that's behind the wheel hex. So now it's just a case of lining up the stub axle with the gear in there. I realize you guys can't see that, but there we go. And it's in just like that. So now I got to put in the 2 kingpin bolts, and those also get thread lock. There we go. And that's on. It's nice and loose. Everything works very nice and smooth. So now I'm going to go do the other side off camera because it's, you know, exactly the same thing again. And then I'll put you guys back on once that one's installed. Alright, so I got the other portal box fully assembled and all that. So that's all set up and running nice and smoothly. So now that that's all been done, now it's time for this Panhard reinforcement bracket by Bauhaus RC. So now this piece is very, very simple to install. All you have to do is take this piece right here, line it up with the Panhard bracket, and pop it on like that. And it should line up just like that. And then it comes with hardware. So what you're going to do is take the really, really short screw that it comes with. Don't know if you guys can see that. And then you are going to take a little bit of thread lock, put it on the screw, and then screw it in right here. That screws into the reinforcement bracket and locks it into place. And all that's doing is really just strengthening up this area of the axle because it's just that tiny little plastic piece. And then you screw on the Panhard link as normal with the included screw. So now that I've showed you how to install it, I'm going to put the front axle back on. Alright, so the front axle's back on. As you see, there are the aluminum portal boxes, and then right in here, that's the aluminum Panhard reinforcement bracket, so now the front axle is a whole lot more durable. So that's all it for the front axle, so I'm going to put the wheels back on, and then we'll move on to the rear axle real quick. Alright, so the rear axle is going to be a whole lot quicker and simpler than the front axle, just because there's not a whole lot to upgrade on the rear. So I just got a set of portal covers, just like the ones that are on the front, just to match. So I'm going to put those on real quick, show you what they look like, and then we'll move on. Alright, so yeah, that's just the cap, the KYX one. Same as the front, but it didn't come with any hardware, so you use the stock screws, which is absolutely fine. And yeah, it's just a little extra piece right there. So I'm going to get the wheel back on, and then we'll move on to the next upgrade. Alright, so there aren't very many parts left to install. We have the front and rear chassis braces, and the front and rear shock tower sets. Now, unlike almost everything else, the shock towers are not KYX. These are the Trail ones. They're a little bit nicer, and they've got some perks up against the KYX ones, which is why I spent the extra money to get the Trail ones. So these are kind of gonna go on together. So I'm gonna start in the front. So we're gonna get the front shock tower and the front chassis braces, and we're gonna get those installed. And to do that, it looks like I'm gonna have to take apart some stuff. I'm probably gonna take off the fenders to make life a little bit easier. So I'll get some stuff disassembled, and then I'll put you guys back on. Alright, so these Trail shock towers are really, really nice. They're 7075 CNC machined aluminum, and they've got a whole lot more shock mounts, which I'll show you in a minute. But if we look at the truck itself, you will notice that I've just kind of removed the inner fenders and the original plastic front chassis brace, and to do that you had to remove the molded engine, but that's fine, that'll go back on with the new aluminum one. So now I'm going to take off this shock tower first because it's easier, and I'll show you the differences. Alright, so comparing the new Trail one versus the stock Axial one, you can see the Trail one has way more shock mounting locations, which you know, makes it a little bit more adjustable for people that like to do that. I'm going to still use the stock location, but still, overall, really nice construction. It's more solid right here. So yeah, so let's get the Trail one installed. Alright, so now that the Trail shock tower is installed, I did use thread locker on the screw that holds the shock, the top shock mount in place. It does come with hardware for everything, but it's not mandatory, so I used the stock hardware, and it's just fine. So you are going to use thread lock for these two screws as well. One's for the inner fender well, one's for the chassis brace. But before I do any of that, I'm going to flip it around and do the other side. Okay, so on the stock Scx10 these two components are separate. As you can see, it's held together by a screw. With the Trail one, it's all integrated. So this is the shock tower and Panhard bar mount all connected together. So now, for some of these, there is a difference in screws. These are countersunk, whereas those aren't, so you will want to use the hardware for that. Now, this screw is supposed to go, or there's another screw here that's supposed to go through and into the chassis, so I have to find the screw for that. I'm not exactly sure which one it is, but I will let you guys know about it. So I'm going to try and get this installed, and then I'll let you know about that. Okay, quick addendum right here. If you look in here, you'll see there's a spacer here. That's included with the Trail part, and you actually do need to put that spacer in along with one of the longer screws that is included with the Trail set, because otherwise it doesn't clear the servo horn. So just something to point out, you're going to need the wider spacer. Alright, so I got the shock tower installed. Turns out that the screw that goes here is actually the same one that came out of it, so you don't need to use the included screw for that, even though I guess you could if you wanted to, or if like you stripped it out, I guess. That's the nice thing about Trail, they give you the spare parts for everything. So this is all screwed in. I only use thread locker for the Panhard screw and the shock screw. So now I'm going to get the inner fenders back on, and then it's time to get the aluminum chassis brace on. So let's do that. Alright, with the inner fender screw back on, now it's time for the KYX aluminum front chassis brace, which is just going to go on like that. It's going to screw onto the scale engine piece, and that's pretty much going to be it. So I'm just going to do that off camera and show you what it looks like. Alright, so as you can see, there's the KYX aluminum chassis brace all screwed up and installed, and then there's the engine cover. Then this extra piece is by Club 5 Racing. It's a little 3D printed piece, and then there's the shock towers. So that's all installed. So as you can see, those are the front and the left and right shock towers, the chassis brace, and the Panhard mount from the chassis, all upgraded to aluminum. So now it is time to move on to the rear shock towers and chassis braces. So both the KYX aluminum rear chassis brace and the Trail rear shock towers both come with hardware. However, I'm only going to be using the hardware that came with the KYX part, just because that's the only one that the screws actually threading in, whereas this, it's just the holes. So now it's really just disassembly, and I'm not going to walk you through the whole process again because it's pretty much the same as the front. I'm going to be taking off the fenders and screwing it back all in. So I'm going to get this all installed and I'll show you the end result. Alright guys, so I got the Trail shock towers all installed along with the KYX aluminum chassis brace. It all went on as expected. No issues at all. I did end up not using the screws that were included with the KYX one because they were just really short, and I think part of that was because the Trail shock towers are quite a bit thicker. So I ended up using some longer screws that came with the Trail set itself. So that's all attached. As you can see, here are the original parts, and yeah, as you can kind of see on the Trail one, all of that is, you know, full solid aluminum, whereas this stuff, it's just thin hollowed out plastic. Okay, let me get the fender wells on and we will finish everything off. All right guys, thank you for joining me on this massive upgrade adventure, as we did get a whole lot of stuff done. We got the shock towers front and rear done. We got the whole front axle beefed up with some aluminum components and a bunch of other strong beefy pieces. We got new chassis braces on there. We got new portal covers on there, and we got the link mounts upgraded, all to aluminum. And after it was all said and done, thanks to a lot of the components coming with their own hardware, this is all the spare screws I have left over, which is quite a large amount. And so that's great to have spare screws for anything. I mean, this is, you know, this will keep you in business if you lose screws every now and again. This is perfect for that kind of thing. But anyway guys, thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe and leave a comment in the section below for what videos you'd like to see next. But that's all for today everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.